Thank you for listening to the BJJBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back, my friends, to the BJJBrick Podcast. This is episode 332. Today we have an interview with our friend Maine Miller. He's from the Grappling Rewind Podcast. He's going to kind of recap a lot of stuff that happened in 2019 as far as the competitive scene, and then we'll take a peek forward what's happening in the future as well. So it's really good to have Maine here, somebody who has his finger on the pulse of the competitive scene so well, and he's going to bring to us all this insight that we largely on this podcast don't really cover. We don't really cover current events or competitions that are right around the corner or that just happened. So really cool to have Maine in here to kind of recap the whole year for us. My name is Byron Jabbar. I'm here with my good buddies Joe Thomas and Gary Hall. Guys, I've got a quote I want to bring in here right away. And Gary, I was thinking of you on this one, man, because I know you're a very talented
man, I'm glad
artist.
You think about me.
Not so much a talented martial artist, but a talented artist. This is a quote from our, I don't know, I say our friend. I call everybody a friend. But a quote from Bob Ross. And if you don't know who Bob
Violent
Ross
Bob
is.
Ross?
What was that?
Is that Violent Bob Ross?
No,
the
just
UFC
regular,
fighter?
happy, super nice guy. I think he might have passed away a little while ago. Bob Ross. And he had a painting show on public television. And he was just always soothing and relaxing. And Bob Ross said, "Talent is a pursued interest. Anything that you're willing to practice, you can do." And I think he was addressing the people who watch him paint and really enjoy his paintings and what he's creating, but just put that on the shelf as, I can't do that. I'm not naturally an artist. I'm not a painter. And he was trying to encourage people to pick up that paintbrush, and if it's something that's interesting to you, you can pursue it, and that will help you get through the stages of practice that may be less enjoyable or not get you the results you want, and you'll develop those skills. And so the interest is very important. And if you're interested in something, go ahead and start to pursue that, whether it's painting or jiu-jitsu or whatever, and get through the times at the beginning where your paintings don't really look like anything, right, Gary?
Right.
Joe is more of an artist. He's
Sometimes your jiu-jitsu doesn't really look like anything either, right, Gary?
No, right.
Man, I'm stunned that Bob Ross has passed. I'm more stunned to find out that he passed in 1995. I thought he was still alive.
Yeah, Joe, sorry for your this loss here. You're just now taking on the air, and
I got to keep up a little bit more, I think.
Keep up and keep your head up, Joe. I mean, he did some great stuff for this, and don't let this get you down today, buddy.
Well, one thing I like about it is the quote says, anything you're willing to practice, you can do. It doesn't necessarily say you'll get really good at it, or you'll be the best you'll be the best in the room, or world champion or something. And I always like to remind myself that the jiu-jitsu journey is very individual. And if you're interested and you're willing to practice, you can do it. But some people are just some people ain't going to be world champions.
But you can sure enjoy it.
But don't let that stop you from pursuing it.
Yeah, don't let you stop you from pursuing it. I don't know if you guys know, but Bob Ross actually lost a finger when he was younger. So, I mean, easily he could have thought, hey, I can't be a painter like he is. But he did it. He didn't let, a loss of a finger pursue him from being a painter. I mean, the dude's talented. Dude has drive.
You're serious? I'm just Googling this.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I mean, you guys didn't know that about him? But, I mean, there's a lot of stuff people didn't really know about him that, he I mean, besides losing a finger and then becoming a painter, he actually tried it and worked it. But, the crazy thing was, he never took any money from PBS. He didn't take a dime. Never once got paid by
They never
PBS.
caught him once.
No, I mean, he really never did get paid by him. And, those paintings, when he was younger, he used to sell his paintings. But as he got older, he donated those paintings to help TV stations raise money. So, that was pretty impressive. But another thing people don't realize about him, especially with his hair, but, he was a 20-year master sergeant in the Air Force, a career military man.
Man, I might be trying to find more Bob Ross quotes later because I got you all motivated. Gary, you know the history of this guy, Bob Ross, and I'm just impressed you're just pulling this all out of thin air here.
Yeah, Bob Ross.
The internet makes you look pretty good there, Gary.
Why do you guys say I got this from the internet? Why do you not think I know about Bob Ross?
Well, which hand did he lose his finger on?
It was his other hand, not his painting hand.
Exactly.
What? I don't go up and hang out with him. I don't know him as a person.
Well, that would be tough now, Gary. That's a little insensitive.
I bet you
Joe
guys
just
never
found out
even
about
noticed
this.
that. Yeah. Well, Joe thought he was alive still. I bet you had no clue he lost a finger when you used to watch him paint. And I guarantee you, when you watch Bob Ross, reruns now, you're going to look at his finger, look at his hand, see what hand is missing.
Well, I don't think I'm going to be looking at his hands, but his afro will make a little more sense.
He always did say, one of the things he always was quoted is he didn't like his haircut.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah. I mean, but you can find that, on the website, realclear.com, 23 happy little Bob Ross facts that most viewers never knew.
He didn't like his haircut, huh?
No. Yep. We'll put a link to that.
I thought
in
he
the
had a
show
great
notes.
haircut.
Yeah.
If you don't know what Gary looks like, he looks a lot like Bob Ross.
Without the hair.
Well, Bob Ross was helping people get to that canvas, pick up that paintbrush and mix some colors together and start putting them on that canvas there. And we're willing to do the same for you. Get on that mat, throw that gi on. And we have an audiobook called Your First Year of BJJ. And whether you are thinking about, training jiu-jitsu or you've started and you're getting through that first year right now, the book might be able to help you out quite a bit. It's $11.99. It's basically like a podcast. It's me walking you through what to expect from finding the right gym to what to expect your first month, techniques you want to work on in your first year, and getting jiu-jitsu to fit into your off-the-mat life, all the way up to if you want to do a tournament and what to expect on that. The money goes and helps support the show. Look for it in the BjjBrick shop. And it's basically like a podcast. It's about 2.5 hours long, and I want to help you, find that paintbrush of jiu-jitsu. I guess there's a paintbrush technique, and it's a fairly beginner technique, fairly simple anyway. And start making those happy little arm bars and happy little guillotines. Does that make any sense, you guys? I guess if you don't know Bob Ross, he used to paint like happy little trees and. A happy little stream.
He actually painted trees in 91% of his paintings.
Give or take.
Yeah.
Nope. 91%.
All right. Well, I think Gary's about to write an article about Bob Ross and jiu-jitsu.
Ooh.
I don't think he could pull that off. I don't think Gary could.
I bet there's less than a 91% chance that's going to get rid of it. You guys are just mad because I know more about Bob Ross than you guys do.
I'm impressed
Got
that
me,
you
Gary.
could read off of a website while doing a podcast.
Why do you guys think it's a website?
Because
I gave the listeners a website, in case they want to learn more about Bob Ross.
That, for all I know, you secretly run that website and you're funneling traffic to that. That's pretty cool. Good, well played, Gary.
The number one link is the BjjBrick Podcast.
Oh man, hey guys, I got a kind of a silly off the mat lesson here. my wife and I go occasionally to a restaurant called Jason's Deli. It's here in Wichita, and it's no big deal. It's a salad bar, and get kind of all you can eat salad, and then it also has a soft serve ice cream machine, and it's nothing.
That ain't ice cream.
It's nothing amazing. It's pretty. It's very average. If you could become very average at anything, so. The thing that I do at this thing is we like to sit near the ice cream machine and watch people make cones. It is hilarious. Some people make very small cones. Some, try to go a little bigger. But it's just funny to watch people oftentimes do something that they're terrible at. We had my favorite one is this older guy. And I say that no offense, guys. I mean, this guy was probably over 85. No, he comes up, he gets a cone, he fills it with ice cream, and he stands at the machine and devours it. And then he gets another one, and then he goes and sits down. And I almost guarantee you that his wife limits his diet because he probably has a medical condition. He shouldn't even have one. Yeah. And he sneaks an entire cone up at the machine while she's sitting down eating her salad.
I like that.
Kind of funny. Okay, the whole thing.
I'll bet the second one was smaller too.
Probably. So my deal at this is I like to kind of be, I call it ornery. My wife has other ways to describe it, but I like to be kind of silly in public and make a fool out of myself sometimes. And sometimes it happens naturally, but sometimes I can just do it on purpose, and I just enjoy being kind of an idiot. So I will go up to this machine, and I will make the cone as large as possible. And there's a couple of different techniques to do this, but basically, I can make an ice cream cone as long as until it hits the bottom. At the bottom of the ice cream machine, it has like a little grate where if you drip some ice cream, it lands on that. I can make it that large to where it's like 8 or 9 inches tall. It's pretty ridiculous.
Really?
Yeah.
8 or 9 inches tall. It's that large.
The key is to also make it thicker.
Okay.
No, like people just
what kind of podcast we running here?
Put the ice cream on there.
Kidding.
You got to kind of mash it in there, and it makes a better platform. And one time I make this cone, and it's ridiculous. And I'm coming back to the chair, and somebody looks at me, and like it was surprised, like this person I don't know, and then I go, I did it, guys. And I said it loud enough to where a lot of the people around us look at me, and I'm holding this ginormous, ridiculous cone, and people started clapping.
Awesome.
And I wanted to give like a little impromptu speech, but it didn't really come out. I was like, "Thank you guys for your support. I've always wanted to do this." And literally in this silly little restaurant, normal restaurant, I guess, but people are clapping for the size of cone I've created, and it's just ridiculous. Anyway, the whole thing, off the mat lesson. Here we go. So I got to bring it back to jiu-jitsu. People have different goals, and my goal in that, you might think it is to make the biggest cone possible. Really, it's just to get to kind of tease my wife at how ridiculous I'm being, or to just to have fun and be kind of silly. But on the mat, people have different goals. Some people might want to become like a top tier grappler. Some people might want to lose a little weight, or redefine their sweeping game, or refine their sweeping game, or train with certain people, or help out other people. Like, there's lots of different goals. You can't tell the goal of the person necessarily just by looking at them, or even sometimes training with them, because sometimes when you train with somebody, their behaviors don't actually match the goals they have set. So a lot of times it's really helpful just to ask them, what are you hoping to get out of this training session? If it's just kind of a one-time thing, or like if you're traveling, or if you're teaching something. But it's nice to know what your teammates want out of training jiu-jitsu, and some of them, it's pretty obvious. They're competing regularly. They have goals about that. They talk about that. But a lot of teammates don't talk about their goals. And if their goal is to make a giant ice cream cone, and you don't know that, it's hard to support them in that. So I think it's a good conversation to have every now and then, because goals do change. Their goal might just be to come in and get kind of sweaty and get a workout out of jiu-jitsu. But I don't know. It's hard to tell what people's goals are unless you talk about it. And I think that's an important thing to do in jiu-jitsu.
I like what you're saying there. It's hard to tell what goals are unless you talk about it. And Joe and I actually had this conversation last week. We were talking about goals, and I think Joe was a little surprised when I told him, really, I don't have goals for jiu-jitsu. I just show up and really, I guess I want to have fun. I guess maybe that's a goal, but I never really set it as a goal. I do jiu-jitsu because it's fun, and I show up because I can burn some calories. I can have some fun. But it was a pretty cool conversation that Joe and I were just talking about goals. Some people have them. Maybe I might be the only one who doesn't. But it was a pretty good conversation.
Yeah, you might not be the only one that doesn't, but I do think you're in a
minority.
Smaller field for sure. And I think you're in even a smaller field when you consider that you've been pretty dang successful at it. So
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, 16, 17 years of getting better every year. That's pretty good.
Well, the crazy thing is, since we talked about that, I've been thinking about that. I was like, does everybody really set goals? I just started. It's just been making my head wonder. But, I wonder if the reason I don't really set goals, for me, goals aren't fun. What I deal with in work, I get goals every month, every year, and they're more of it puts a bad taste in my mouth, because I see people all the time who don't hit goals out on the unemployment line. You don't get you don't keep your job. You don't get a raise. You don't get your bonus. And so, I mean, it's nice, the end result, when you get a bonus, but I guess I've just lived in this world too long that it's just like, man, I just finished one goal that I thought was impossible. The next goal comes up, and it leads to stress for me. And I wonder if that has, the goals for my work life has carried over to, why I don't set goals in my fun life, which is jiu-jitsu.
That makes total sense. I think all of us kind of go to jiu-jitsu to get a break from our everyday life. And so, if your everyday life is all about setting goals, I don't blame you, Gary.
Yeah. And, I just think I like what Byron said, though. I mean, we don't really know, especially if you're a gym owner, you really have to know why your people are training, because everybody is different. I mean, some schools are very heavily competition oriented, and some schools aren't. And, everybody is there for a different reason. And if you know that reason, you're just going to have a better relationship with your students, better retention. I really like this lesson.
Yeah, I mean, Gary, what if one of the guys you train with's goal was to get, better pressure, or what if it was to just make jiu-jitsu a really good cardio workout and just to get that good sweat going for 45 minutes to an hour? Like, those are two different things. And as a teammate, you could do things that are different. Like you do a lot of long rolling sessions with people sometimes, and that would be perfect for the person who wants to turn this into a, that calorie burner. Yeah, if they want to work, maybe they want to work on a certain part of their game. I think you do have goals sometimes with that. Like you say, hey, I want to work on leg locks for a little while, or I want to work on getting somebody's back and develop that part of my game. So it's not like a big goal of, this is what's going to happen, but it's like you have areas of focus, which you could view those as a bit of a goal.
I guess you're right. Yeah, I guess you could view that. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So
I
guess maybe I don't call it a goal, so I don't have to deal with...
You don't score.
Yeah. Yep.
It makes it less stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think most goals, and we talked about doing episodes about this, but can be broken down into smaller goals, which make them a lot more friendly. You know, if your goal is to be a doctor, well, and you're in high school, your first goal should be to start getting good grades. Like, don't worry about being a doctor yet. Get some good grades. You know, pay attention to school, learn
Take a
how
lot
to
of
learn
science classes.
Yeah, and then your second goal will be get to the college you want to get into. Don't worry about passing the big medical tests. Get into the right college.
And your third goal is learn how not to sleep.
That's probably on the list.
Yep. Once you become a resident, you're not going to get
they're
much
hard
sleep.
on them. Residents.
That's what she said.
Well, probably. All right, let's get to our interview with Maine Miller. All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Maine Miller to the BjjBrick Podcast. Maine, I met you back at ADCC, and you are the host or one of the members of Grappling Rewind Podcast, and we need to talk about that as far as what that is. But just get us on page. Who is Maine Miller? Tell us a little bit about your jiu-jitsu experience and what you do.
How you guys doing? I'm Maine Miller. I run and host the Grappling Rewind Podcast along with my team. I started jiu-jitsu probably 6 or 7 years ago, and I wanted to learn how to fight. And I walked into an MMA gym and went, "Hey, I'd like to learn how to do this." And they went, "There's a jiu-jitsu class at 6. Come back then." And I went, "Okay." And I never looked back, really. I started that, did a little MMA here and there, kind of trained it, but never actually fought. And then just really fell in love with jiu-jitsu at kind of the tail end of college. And then moved down here to Baltimore and just continued doing it. So I'm a purple belt now. I run the Johns Hopkins University Club for Jiu-Jitsu. I also teach at a couple of adjacent academies, Grapple Academy Martial Arts here in Nottingham and occasionally over at Baltimore BJJ. But yeah, I love Jiu-Jitsu and I train at down here in Baltimore.
Cool. And Grappling Rewind, let's talk about that for a little bit. There's really nothing like it that I've seen as far as covering competitive jiu-jitsu. Tell us a little bit about what started that and where it is today.
So it's kind of funny. It started really with ADCC 2017. And everyone watched ADCC, and it's pretty much if you're going to watch a jiu-jitsu event in a 2-year span, you're going to probably watch ADCC and tune in for that event. And so all of us, on my gym and every other gym that I've trained at, were watching ADCC, and this dude came up and he was subbing dudes. He subbed Leandro Lowe, subbed Murillo, and I was like, who is Craig Jones? And why is there like very little information on who this standout grappler from Australia of all places is? And it was that point I realized that there's not a whole lot of like week to week reporting on jiu-jitsu. And if you want to follow the pro scene, because this guy's that good, there should be a ton of information. You should have been able to see him, and like people should have been able to follow him competing in the lead up to ADCC, because a guy that good doesn't just kind of appear out of nowhere. He's been competing. He's been winning for a long time. And if you look at his record before ADCC, you can kind of see that. And we realized that there was no way to follow professional jiu-jitsu in any sort of week-to-week format. And so we decided, hey, do you want to start, covering all the pro events for pro jiu-jitsu so that people that are interested in it like we are can follow it, because there's just not a resource out there for it. And so if there's not one, you sort of have to create it. And so we created the Grappling Rewind and started covering all of the pro events. And it took a while for us to figure out exactly how to do that, because when we started, there was no big cohesive list. And really, there still isn't a cohesive list aside from the list that kind of we make on our website for all of the events cross-platform. So we cover stuff on Flow Grappling, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Fight Pass. If it's a pro event with commentary that has like decent streaming and has results up after the event, we try to cover it at least in some fashion so that people that are interested in pro jiu-jitsu can watch it.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned that list, and we've talked about it on the show as well. It's nice to see, because typically you're just looking at the list of what promotion has something coming up. You guys are independent and are able to talk about any promotion you want, to talk any competitor you want to talk about. It's really nice having that there.
Yeah, and that's really what we like, because we're not tied to anything. We can, if we want to cover a Polaris on the same day we do a Quintet and a Fight to Win, or an IBJJF event, or something something on a different platform, we can do that. We can cover really what we're interested in covering. And we find that's the best. That's kind of the best, is we can see a huge range of different grapplers that maybe aren't on, maybe a guy that's not in the sub-only scene, or a guy that's only in the sub-only scene. And so we get to see all of that, all those different styles of grapplers, all the different styles of rule sets. And it's really just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I come at jiu-jitsu from a different angle as far as, like, I don't watch nearly as much jiu-jitsu as you do as far as competitive jiu-jitsu, and it's just I have never really watched that much sports of anything. And with jiu-jitsu, I think that it's interesting that the people that watch it also do jiu-jitsu. It's much different than MMA, where most people watching MMA have no ability or any real desire to do MMA. They're just fans of that. But the jiu-jitsu practitioner, your audience, is actively doing the sport you're talking about. And I think that's an interesting perspective. So you're able to talk about it in ways that it's like our level. Like, we're able to talk about the techniques like to somebody who actually knows how to do this technique, or has at least attempted it, or has had it done to them. I think it's a neat perspective.
You're kind of preaching to the choir here with the show. Like, really, no one is really, very few people, if anyone, is watching jiu-jitsu that's not actively doing jiu-jitsu, or they're watching a family member compete in jiu-jitsu. So we have a really interesting audience there, because the people that you're kind of talking to are the ones that are actually on the mats and like engaged in jiu-jitsu on a week-to-week basis. And so because we are in that kind of niche, I think the term I use for it a lot of the times is like, we are enthusiast press. We are engaged in the sport. We're talking to people that are also engaged into the sport. And so we have a kind of a different perspective there on what we're watching versus talking to kind of a layman, because typically the layman isn't really involved in the sport.
Yeah, that's cool. So to talk about what's happened over the last year, because, I mean, we're airing this in December. The year is kind of behind us here, and I think it's interesting to do kind of a recap, because things have changed over this last year. Would have been some things that you would like to talk about, you know, kind of a broad topic, but we have some stuff kind of that we want to cover. But over the course of the year, anything that's a big standout for you?
Man, it has been a good year. I'm really happy we're doing this now, because we do our year-end recap show pretty much this time. So we're going to be recording it actually this Monday for our show. So I have a giant list of stuff together. We usually do a top 10 breakdown. We're still kind of talking about the top 10 matches of the year internally, so I don't have that list yet. But really, it was a great year for super fights. The highlight of the year, I mean, everyone's going to say it, is going to be ADCC. We saw so many amazing performances come out of ADCC, and so many like really cool moments and grapplers. Again, somebody gets famous every year at ADCC, and we had really two guys this year that took it away, and that was Lachlan Giles and Ty Rotolo. Both those dudes just put on performances at ADCC. And honestly, ADCC as a whole this year was unlike any other year. Like, it was hands down probably one of the greatest grappling events, or it was the greatest grappling event that's ever been done. It paid out huge. The production was great. It filled an arena, and you were there, and we met. Actually, that's where we met. It was unlike any other event that has ever been done for jiu-jitsu, and that, I think, really elevated the sport in a big way.
Yeah, it was in those two grapplers you're talking about. It's interesting. Just to watch them, like, having talked to Lachlan before that years ago, and then soon after that event, it's just amazing what he did as far as like a total turnaround. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. He lost in the first round, and then the person that beat him went to lose that next fight. Like, that doesn't feel good.
No, he lost to Lepre, and then Lepre gets beat, and then he, as a guy, I think was he 66?
Yes,
or 77.
Right. I don't.
No, sorry, he was 77. He was 77 this year, and then he goes in as one of the smaller guys in absolute, and then he taps Kenan Duarte, and Kenan Duarte had just won the 99, the +9. I think literally the guy that just won the biggest division. You have a guy that got knocked out in the first round of the second to the smallest division.
You can't get a bigger underdog. Like,
no, I mean, really, like, there was almost not a bigger underdog in the absolute, and he gets him. It's like, okay, that's a huge win in itself. And then, okay, so he wins, so he goes to the next round, and you have Patrick Gaudio, and it's like, okay, he's not going to get by Gaudio, because like you get a guy once. Okay, I can understand that. You're probably not going to get another guy that was at 88 or 99, like anything above that, and he taps him with the exact same technique again. And we were in the arena like, okay, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then he runs into Gordon, and Gordon rear naked chokes him. And then we went, okay, well, he has a third place match now with Muhammad Ali, another dude that's in the +99 kilogram division that's giant and huge, and he gets him with the same exact technique. So that dude's the giant slayer, man. He had the breakout performance of ADCC because nobody expected him to beat Duarte, then beat Gaudio, then beat Ali by the same technique, a really similar entry. Like it was amazing. And he talked about it like directly after. I think he gained like 12,000 Instagram followers that day.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
And now he's been on a seminar tour across the United States and across the world. And like that's a real life-changing thing. Lachlan's been around for a while. I think he's been to ADCC, I think 2 or 3 separate times.
Yeah. He was in that the time before. And I don't remember if he got past his first match or not. But I told him after it was over.
They lost to Torres in 2017.
That's what it was. Okay. Yeah. It's like, it was odd after it was all over. They have the guys up on the podiums getting pictures and stuff like that. And he gets up there for the 3rd place for the absolute. And I said, there was a belt or a trophy. I can't remember what it was. It said best fighter. And I was like, you're getting that. And they didn't give it to anybody. Have you ever, like, they actually made the belt. I have a picture of it. It says best fighter. What happened to that? Did something happen to that? Okay, it's a trophy.
I thought Gordon got that.
Okay. I didn't think that they awarded it to anybody that day.
No, they didn't award it that day. It was awarded, I want to say 1 or 2 weeks later.
Okay.
They all came out, and I forget exactly who got it. I thought it was Gordon because he got double gold. Another really amazing performance of the year.
Yeah.
He taps 6 out of 8 guys at the highest level, to win double gold. And potentially we're going to see that match with Galvao now that kind of has been ruminating for a couple years at this point.
Yeah. But
yeah, I mean, that's one of my highlight moments of the year. As a little guy, like I'm a guy that I can make 145 if I decide to compete on Wednesday night if weigh-ins are on Friday. Like, it's not that hard. So a guy like around that size, and Lachlan's a little bigger than me, but to see a guy have success like that and actually like tapping some of the best guys in the world, like Muhammad Ali, world champion, Kenan Duarte, world champion in the gi and IBJJF champion, Gaudio up there as well, world champion. It's super impressive. And so as a little guy in that arena, just absolutely lost it during that match.
Yeah, that was the 3 loudest times by far in that arena. It was his 3 submission victories, which were that was a pretty wild experience. Something that
it was a really special moment for the year, I think, and we get moments like that very infrequently in jiu-jitsu, and for it to culminate at the biggest, greatest grappling event ever, and you have a guy put on a performance like that against the level of competition that he had, in conjunction with all the other great matches, like one of the best matches ever, Canuto versus Tonin. Yeah. Like that happened in the absolute as well, or I think it was weight class as well. You had like Tyra Tolo's breakout performance in ADCC. You had Gordon winning double gold. You had him versus Buchecha. Like there were so many great moments. You had Pena versus Galvao. There were so many great moments that happened in that ADCC. And so it's really hard to pick one, but that was just such a unique moment, or really a section of unique moments. It really is definitely in the top contention for like moments of 2019.
Yeah. That was all of those. And I do believe you could go to Flow and watch the whole thing, the whole event.
Oh yeah,
is up there.
Is it by match or is it by you can actually like sit and watch the whole thing?
I don't know. That's a good question. It's probably by match.
We usually go back if individual matches are up. We usually do it that way just because it's difficult to jump to find stuff when we're trying to recap it or trying to go back to watch and do tape study on guys. So typically once the individual matches are up, we jump directly to that. But a lot of times initially for events, we'll go through before the matches are up because we record our show typically on Sunday or Monday night. And so events typically occur on Saturday or Friday. And so the matches aren't up for a lot of promotions. And so we'll go through whole events, but I don't know if ADCC has I assume they have map broadcasts, but I know they've parsed everything out into individual matches now.
Yeah. And that was hard to watch as far as when they started Absolute, was it 2 mats at the same time or 3?
When they started Absolute, it was 3.
That was insane. I'm like, I want to watch all of these matches, and I'm just losing my neck is getting sore from looking around.
Yeah, well, and we were both kind of backstage there, so I was in the process of trying to watch matches, trying to grab guys for interviews, and do a bunch of other things while we were there to generate content for the Grappling Rewind, while also watching the matches, so that later that evening we can go into our recap show in the Airbnb on the podcast. And so it was I think I've finally probably just caught up on sleep from that event like this week. Just because it was so much. I think I was sleeping like 3 hours or 4 hours a night at ADCC.
Yeah.
We would go to the event early. We would kind of set up. We would then watch the event. We would be there till after everyone left, like getting final interviews and, figuring out everything. Then we would leave. We would eat. We would go back to the hotel. We would record an entire recap of the day. Then I would edit that, and then I would upload it to the RSS for the podcast, and then the YouTube page after we'd edit the video, and then I would go to sleep and we'd do it again. Yep. So it was a couple long days, but it was a really cool experience, and it got me really excited. Even if all that work we did, it got me really excited for 2021, because if it's anything like 2019, because now it's still got Seth from Fight to Win producing it. Mo Jassam is still going to be the event organizer, and it's the first time we've ever had an event organizer run it twice in a row, and that sort of speaks to the quality of how good the 2019 event was.
Yeah, he's the right guy. He had the right team. Yeah.
So there were other events that happened this year as well that were pretty amazing.
Yeah, so that's definitely by far the one I'm the most familiar with, being there, having all the build-up and studying the competitors before the event and all that sort of thing. What other highlights as far as events or promotions catch your eye?
We had Spyder this year. We had Spyder last year as well, but Spyder BJJ Korea, they had their finals a couple months ago, and they paid out $100,000 to the winners of that event. And that is the biggest BJJ purse that we have ever seen, and it's a hallmark for the sport. That putting that much money into athletes' hands, into the community, is only a good thing. And we're seeing more events pay out more and more money. But I think Spyder, just with the amount of money, they had $250,000 for the athletes in that event. And that is, again, unlike anything we've ever seen. ADCC in total pays out about that much across, I think 9 divisions or something like that. I've got that completely wrong. So it's really cool to see athletes now. We're seeing people that can start legitimately making a living for themselves just as competitors. And I think that's a big shift that we've seen even from 2017 to 2018 into 2019, is that if you were at the top level, you're probably going to be putting out your instructionals as well, but you can win enough tournaments throughout the year to actually survive as a pro athlete if you choose to do that. None of the guys choose to do that because the real money is in instructionals and seminars and that sort of thing, but it's becoming a viable option. And that's a big shift. I think it's kind of an underrated shift in the sport right now, is that guys can be professional athletes finally.
Yeah. I've heard it said like a world champion title will make you money, in the fact that you could teach and make more money while you teach.
Right.
It's a marketing thing, basically.
Yeah. I mean, and the IBJJF on this is actually the first year that they paid out the GI World Championships as well. And I'm not sure what the highest payout was. I think it was close to $5,000. I know it was up to $7,000 if you had 33 people or 32 people in your division, but there were no divisions that actually met that requirement this year. But it is a pretty big deal that they're finally paying out for the World Championships. Again, we're starting to see athletes being awarded money for winning in competition. And that's a really good shift in the sport, because people getting paid only increases the level of professionalism, only increases the ability of guys to have a legitimate camp going into these events, and it brings up the overall level of the sport. So, it's definitely not a bad thing.
Yeah. And so Spyder was in South Korea, just getting the basic facts here. Gi only, and did they have 2 weight classes?
Yeah, they had 2 weight classes. They had an above 100 kilogram weight class, under 100 kilogram weight class, and they had an under 76 kilogram weight class, I think is what they had. Okay. And it was a really great event. Again, some of the matches were definitely on the slower side, but when you're competing for $100,000, you expect people to come in with their A game and play down to the T the game that that is going to win them that money. It's not necessarily a rule set that's fostered on, or it's looking for action. That rule set is really looking for who is the best grappler under that rule set. And so, that's something that kind of people tend to overlook a little bit, is what is the rule set facilitating? Like a quintet style event, there was some great ones this year, is really a rule set that's looking to entertain you. It's not necessarily looking for who is the best grappler because of a number of factors. It's looking for, hey, here's an entertaining grappling event to watch. Something like Spyder and the IBJJF World Championships and ADCC, those events are really looking for, okay, we want to see who the best grappler is, and those can stand apart.
Yeah, the idea that they're looking at who's the best grappler, there are two different things. And if you're going into a match thinking, how I'm really going to make my living off of this is doing seminars for the next X amount of months or years, whatever, getting something that's exciting, doing, landing a submission, all those things, they help get your name out there versus getting the W out of a kind of a boring match. And if you're getting paid with a W, their boring match is okay. Like in the pocketbook area, like if you're looking for that big payday on the mat, during the event, that's a little different than if you plan on getting your name out there. Like, look how much Lachlan Giles' name got out, getting 3 submissions on guys he shouldn't be able to hang with, looking on paper. That was a good opportunity for him, and he's making his money afterwards.
And that's why guys like, Gary Tonin coming back from MMA, or not really coming back, like he'd always kind of entertained the idea of him doing grappling matches while still competing in his MMA career, but he was given the ADCC invitation. He then declined it to focus on MMA, and then he accepted it when he didn't have a fight book close to ADCC, went and put on one of the most exciting grappling matches we've seen in the year versus Canuto. And we had talked about it on the show that he probably has 3 or 5 of the most exciting grappling matches in the decade. And that's pretty amazing from one guy that he comes and brings the pace. But another guy that kind of came under our radar last year, but really this year, and even more so in the last 6 months, is Dante Leone. Another guy that really comes and brings it and has a very, very exciting style, as well as can hang at the top level. Like we saw him take Laprise back at, I think, Euros. And we saw him just this last weekend at Nogi Worlds win a Nogi World title. I'm sorry, it wasn't Worlds, it was Euros. It was took Laprise back at ADCC. But Leone is another guy that is exciting and can compete at the top level. And those guys are really, really rare. So like it's cool to see we're finding people that are not about the stalling game, are not necessarily just their only game plan is a boring game plan. We have guys now like Leone coming in that can put on exciting matches. Even guys like Mateus Lutez, like can put on really exciting matches while still, getting the win.
Yeah, and he's a fun one to watch and also talk to. He's a serious grappler. Something that always kind of annoys me a little bit is watching a great grappler go to MMA. And there's some reasons I think there are good reasons to do that, and some reasons which kind of annoy me. Do you think we've seen more of this over this year or less of this, or where do you see this going?
So it goes both ways. Every year we lose some people, in quotes there, to MMA, but I think this year more than any other year, we've seen a lot of them come back and continue to grapple. We've seen Rodolfo Vieira come back. We saw him come back once in 2018 for Black Belt CBD, but we saw him a couple times this year compete in grappling events. We've seen Gary Tonin come back. We've seen both Ari Farias and AJ Agazarm stay somewhat active in jiu-jitsu. Guys like Jake Shields are coming over from jiu-jitsu and doing more grappling matches. So that for me says something that there is probably incentive now for guys to come back. So I think Muhammad Ali has an MMA fight scheduled coming up. And we definitely see guys, leave for MMA and come back. Dylan Dennis, AJ Agazarm. But I'm happy that at least jiu-jitsu has some pull to bring these guys back now, because that just lets me keep covering them in jiu-jitsu, which is primarily what I'm interested in watching most of the time.
Yeah.
So it's not. Again, I can't think of offhand who left for MMA that we haven't seen come back. And for me, that's good. Oh yeah, guys like Dorino, actively fighting in the UFC and ranked in the UFC. And I think we've covered Dorino, or at least previewed one of his matchups on like the last 4 or 6 of our shows. So he's a guy that's competing in jiu-jitsu in the gi and no-gi almost every weekend. And so it's really cool that wasn't the case before. We weren't seeing guys do MMA and jiu-jitsu interchanged. We'd see them leave for MMA and then they would be gone. And then maybe at the end of their career, they might come back. But we're seeing a lot more fluidity hopefully because the money's there.
Yeah. I think it's always I think the frustrating part for me is when they leave to make money. You know, like there is money in jiu-jitsu. You have to sometimes find it and maybe wiggle within the niche a little bit to be able to make it work. But you can make, you know, money, like it's like competing, teaching seminars. But when it's like, I'm going to make money in MMA, well, that's also very difficult.
Yeah, and you see guys take a lot of damage too, which shortens guys. And again, if you can make a lot of money in MMA, and I am never going to say a guy that is a world-class grappler, world-class athlete, if you want to make your money however you want to make your money, your athletic prime is very short in the grand scheme of things. Whatever you can do to, you know, make yourself a career and put money on your table, you know, go for it. Selfishly, I like watching guys in jiu-jitsu, but you saw guys like Kron and guys like Gary like go into MMA and be really exciting. And so I do still enjoy MMA. I still like MMA. I still watch a lot of MMA, but I would much rather see the guys that are at the top level in jiu-jitsu stay in jiu-jitsu because that brings the level of all competitors in that sport up. Yeah. And so when those guys have to leave to make money, I understand it, but I would still much rather them be able to stay in jiu-jitsu and be able to generate, you know, a lot of money for themselves in the sport that I really enjoy watching. I don't know who all I don't follow when they go to MMA, or, you know, and I don't even follow, you know, competitive grappling that much or as much as I probably should. But like Ryan Hall said, I want to be the best martial artist I can be, and this is pulling me in this direction. You're doing MMA. I want to fight in the UFC. He's, you know, like that sort of thing. That's cool if that's what you want to do. But just to trade brain cells for dollars, which, I mean, as you rack up the concussions and the hard training, ultimately that's what you're doing. Like, I'm not a big fan of MMA. I think it's... Well, that's why I stopped doing MMA. I trained for like 2 years. I got knocked out a couple times, and I was like, I'm going to stop doing this because this is really hard to study microbiology and get punched in my face. Oh, I'm going to go do jiu-jitsu because I can go through a college degree and I can train every day. And yeah, my joints are a little sore. I'm a little sore here and there, but I'm not getting knocked out. And I'm not getting punched in my face. And so, like, for me, it was a longevity shift. I was like, I really enjoyed MMA, but I just couldn't continue to operate academically on the level that I needed to and that I wanted to while still doing MMA. And so I went, okay, I really enjoy jiu-jitsu. I'm relatively competent at it. I have a good body style for it. And it excites me and entertains me. Why don't I just put more of my athletic and kind of energy into this versus something that I really enjoy, but I'm probably never going to fight, probably never compete in this. I don't really wish to make a career out of it. But I really love jiu-jitsu, so let's keep doing this. Yeah. That's you're looking at long-term things on your body is important. And like you said, with these guys that do MMA, your athletic ability has a kind of a clock on it at that level, because there's no age categories that you're going to jump into and do MMA, you know, at the master's level or any like that doesn't happen. Look at Uriah Faber this weekend. Like, Uriah Faber, I think, is 40 and fighting at bantamweight, fought Peter Yan, and Peter Yan is a young, like, hungry fighter that's at the top of that division. And Faber got, like, really injured in that fight. Like, I think this is the first time we've seen him finished with strikes in his career. I could be wrong about that, but offhand, you know, even it was the twilight of his career to come back out of retirement. It's like, okay, your Faber is really, really good. But eventually those years catch up and you deal with a young dude coming up that's going to punch you in the face a lot. And, you know, that your athleticism runs out a little bit as you get older. Yeah. The hard thing is, I think it is for the MMA guys, is they're not, when they come over back to jiu-jitsu or they come to jiu-jitsu, it's not the same. Like, jiu-jitsu has changed a lot in the past 5 years or whatever. Oh, yeah, even 5 years. I mean, look back in what was the hotness in 2016. That was probably we were starting to get into leg locks. Okay. 2016, it was when the EBIs really popped off and everyone was like on the leg lock kick. That was right before ADCC 2017, where Gordon, you know, put everyone at clinic on. Before that, it was a lot of guys doing the Berimbolo. Before that, it was the X-Guard. And so if you've been out of jiu-jitsu for 5 or 6 years and you're coming back in, you're coming into a huge deficit of, okay, hey, just so you know, guys are going to fall back on your legs, and it's not for anything now. They're really good, and unless you've studied these positions and been in there a lot, they're probably going to rip your leg off for the first 6 or 8 months until you kind of come back up to snuff with your grappling. Yeah.
And that could be a difficult thing for a top-tier MMA athlete to have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, those guys principally, like, I want to get to most guys in MMA. If you're a grappler, you're either looking to get to the back, you're probably looking to get to the top half guard to put damage on a guy. But other than that, in modern MMA, there are very few guys. I think Ryan Hall offhand at the highest level that are going back and falling for heel hooks. Really, like, it's not a good strategy because we've seen it with Frank Mir back in the day versus like Ian Freeman going for the toe hold, gets pounded out. And it's a tough strategy to implement because you no longer have a dominant top position, which in MMA is such a critical thing because if you make a mistake or you don't control well enough, like, I can start punching you in the face a lot.
Yeah.
And so the modern leg lock strategy is really, a lot of it is really grappling centric. And so if you've been out of that and all of a sudden the positional dominance isn't as necessary or isn't as important, and so you're coming into a whole new leg lock game that is entirely divorced from what was required in MMA.
Yeah, you have a lot of good points there. For general fan appeal, does no-gi have an advantage over gi?
For fan appeal, I mean, it all depends. I mean, I think about this a lot versus like what is the most exciting? You think what's the most exciting rule set? Is it gi or no gi? It all depends on the grappler, really. You can put Wagner or Gary or a guy like Dante in either, and that dude's going to be exciting. Like, they are just going to put up in whatever thing. You could throw them in a sambo gi, you could throw in wrestling shoes. Those guys are going to be exciting. You have certain guys that are grindy, top pressure, smash, or guys that are looking for the ad that aren't going to be exciting, and they're going to always fight to their rule set to win. I think no-gi is definitely faster, but you get a lot of times where, let's say, I can't take him down, or you can stall in different places in no-gi. In gi, you're more likely to have a guy walk into the guard and try to pass using grips, versus in no-gi, you're more than likely going to watch a guy in the seated butt position, and they're going to touch hands for 30 or 40 seconds before one guy finally starts to step in. You can also get a lot more in disengagement in no-gi, and so a guy on the top can keep resetting the position over and over and over and over and over, and there's really no way to keep him there as the bottom player. Same thing with the stand-up. If you have a guy that you can't get in on, in the gi, you can kind of hold them and drag them down, and you have other opportunities to take them down, other things that you can do that are going to trip that person up. Versus in no-gi, if someone really wants to disengage or really wants to keep their hips away, it's going to be very difficult to get that guy down if the whole point of what he's trying to do is not let you take him down. So they can stall in different places, but I think more than anything, it's a rule set item where exciting rule sets foster action, and it's a grappler thing. Exciting grapplers are exciting. So I definitely think no-gi is faster paced, and typically that is more fan friendly, but I can point to a bunch of gi matches that were absolutely crazy. I can't do it offhand right now, but there are a bunch of gi matches that have been absolutely crazy, and a bunch of no-gi matches that have been absolutely crazy. But more so than not, it's usually grappler dependent versus, clothing dependent.
So all that being said, is there something about ADCC's rule set, or is it just the level of grapplers that show up to that event that make it so exciting?
It's kind of both, I think. I mean, whenever you put – it's a lot of things make ADCC work and make it work really well. There was prize money for years, and guys want to compete and win that prize money. 2, they have the best guys in the world that are going to go as hard as they possibly can to win that prize money. It's also super prestigious. If winning ADCC is probably from a making money standpoint, probably the best thing you can do in your career is be an ADCC medalist or an ADCC winner. That goes a really long, long way. It has transfer over to MMA, where people in MMA, gi worlds, they kind of know, but for the most part, they understand ADCC. There's a lot more crossover there, and being an ADCC champion has a little bit broader of appeal. But the other thing is that their rule set kind of fosters that. They are pretty decent with penalties. They put an emphasis on the takedown. They put an emphasis on who is engaging in the positions. So if someone is implementing, and forget what the term they use is. I remember them talking about it at the rules meeting. on Friday of ADCC. They talked about whoever is initiating in the positions is going to win. So if the bottom player is initiating, they are going to win the decision. If the top player is initiating and controlling those positions, they are going to win. And so it puts the emphasis on the player that's going to implement more and be engaging more is going to get the decision. And so that pushes both people to be the one engaging, be the one actively sweeping, be the one going for something, in conjunction with they have low scoring matches. You're not getting like 4 and 6 points at a time for most moves. You're getting 2 points at a time or 3 points for something, And so you can never really, it's very difficult to rack up a bunch of points on someone because it's so hard with the way the scoring is kind of put together. And so there's a lot of different things that make ADCC work. But I think it's no small part a rules item and no small part a grappler item.
Are we seeing more super fights, or does it just seem like that because of the social media stuff?
Oh, we're definitely seeing more super fights. I have an event calendar. I've been keeping our event calendar since I think probably public facing since about June of 2018. And you can look at the frequency of events. There was times back in, probably early 2018 where we would cover an event a weekend, or we would preview an event, or we would, you'd have 1 or 2 events that were occurring. Now some of us have to pick and choose what we're going to be able to cover with the team that we have because there's just too many events happening, which is a great problem to have. We've seen probably 4 or 5 different promotions that have put on multiple events come around this year alone. And, we've seen a couple of promotions fade out, but more than not, there are more people in the space now than there were before. Previously, the reason why we can really do our show initially was because Fight to Win runs 40 events a year. And so a lot of weeks, only Fight to Win is running an event. And so it's like, okay, we'll cover that this week because they have big level grapplers on it, but they are the guys that are running shows. And now more frequently than not, there are other events and other shows happening, and we have more to cover. Fight to Win is always going to be a staple there because they put on high level guys and they run week to week. But there's now way more competitors, there's way more matches, there's way more promotions in the space than there were even a year ago. We have seen a huge explosion of just the amount of promotions out there, and everyone is slightly tweaking the rule set and trying different things and expanding so that people are seeing what's working and what's not working, and it's just helping the sport.
So one of the more recent super fights was Gordon Ryan and Bo Nickel. Watched that. What was your thoughts on that one?
I was Matt's side, so it was fun. The hybrid rule sets are weird for me a little bit because a lot of it is, again, I appreciate what it does on a broader scope. It gets wrestlers into potentially watching submission grappling. It gets submission grapplers into watching more wrestling and kind of melding the two worlds and potentially broadening the audience. But it's always going to come down to rule set, especially if you have a top-level guy like Gordon versus a top-level guy like Bo. Does the rule set favor the submission dude, or does it favor the wrestler? And usually who's going to win is going to be, and we saw it versus Pat Downey versus Nick Rodriguez. We saw Pat Downey win with push-outs and with takedowns. He didn't have to mat grapple at all. It was a straight-up wrestling match, and Nick Rodriguez is a very, very good jiu-jitsu wrestler. But versus a world team guy in Pat Downey, he just really wasn't able to, to do anything with that. And the same thing kind of happened for Bo. Bo went to the ground with Gordon and didn't have a ton of items that he could do because he had to engage in the ground. And so the rule set is always going to foster, or right now with the hybrid rule sets we're seeing, it's always going to give an advantage to one guy or the other guy. And I can't think of a rule set that is going to really even the playing field unless you do rounds. But we've also seen that before where we've seen people that are wrestlers go against judo guys or jiu-jitsu guys. They do it in Asia occasionally. And whatever rule set is active for that round, the person that is the practitioner of that rule set wins. And then whenever it goes to submission grappling, the other practitioner wins.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really, there's not enough crossover in the skill set right now to make them super competitive.
So if Bo would have been able to pin Gordon Ryan, literally like a wrestling pin, and get a win off of that, do Do you think he could have done that?
I don't think he could win by pin.
No, but if they would have changed, like, we're tweaking rule sets here. Like,
yeah,
you shouldn't be able to choke a guy either if it's wrestling. There's no triangle choke. But like,
right.
if like, let's say we'll give you that. Like, there's an incentive to engage on the ground. Like, basically, you can't really pin he's not going to be able to pin Gordon Ryan from guard. He's going to have to get to side control, basically.
Right.
Or
and then he's never going to pass.
Yeah.
Versus a guy like, I mean, that's the thing. The problem is at the highest levels, there are very few guys in jiu-jitsu that understand passing. They can pass Gordon Ryan's guard.
Yeah, that's true.
And so Bo Nickel is an outstanding wrestler, but the guys that do only the jiu-jitsu thing can't compete with Gordon in that phase.
Yeah.
It's the same reason, like, why would you ever expect Gordon to be able to take down Bo with a standard, single leg or a double leg in that context? It's just that's the guy that does that thing.
Yeah. It's just that Bo had, like, literally no incentive to be on the mat with him.
Right. And so your goal is to get a takedown late because that's your best pathway to victory, and that's completely understandable. But it's one of those. It's a hybrid rule set item, and it's very difficult when you're trying to meld two styles that have huge deficits of skill from the other practitioner and huge areas of advantage in other areas.
Yeah.
It's just a very, very odd thing. And I appreciate what they're doing from a sport perspective because it will hopefully get more people engaged in the sport. I mean, I hear way more people this year that are interested in learning how to wrestle and learning takedowns on the feet and implementing it in competition than last year. It's maybe it's my group of people that I work with or that we train together. And I mean, even seeing it on the forums, like you're seeing a larger emphasis being placed on takedowns versus it was a thing. Yeah, you should kind of know a takedown or two or be good or have a couple items and be competent. But we are seeing more people actually actively interested in learning a takedown game and learning wrestling and than I think before. So it's a good thing. But the hybrid rule sets is always going to be difficult at the highest levels because you're always going to have a huge skill advantage and a skill deficit whenever you kind of match those two guys up. The guy that's not a top-level wrestler is not going to double-leg the top-level wrestler, and the guy who's a top-level submission grappler is not going to not submit the other guy on the mat. And so it's an interesting kind of conundrum, and I'm super happy that I'm not a promoter when it comes to that because I have no idea. I mean, all we do every single week is talk about different events. And usually a portion of that is we talk about the rules for that event so that whoever's listening to our show can understand kind of the context of how the match is happening, where are the points that someone's going to want to score from, and how does it work. And so we look at a lot of different rules. And we actually did an entire show, I think might have been this year, might have been last year, on various rule sets and what rule sets foster the most action and what rule sets, what are the kind of the pros and the cons of different rule sets and things we'd like to see in the future. And it's a difficult thing. I mean, I think Ricardo Amendola today on Instagram put up, it was a question of, hey, how would you like to change this rule? And there's huge responses on both sides of, how to change the rules, how to make things more exciting, how to incentivize positions, how to incentivize certain, action on the mat. And it's an ongoing and it's a dynamic discussion, but I'm really happy that we're talking about the discussion because it helps make the sport better. And being married to a single rule set, I think at this stage jiu-jitsu is not a good thing. We see all these different rule sets, and I think they all bring something right now that is really unique, and I'm very happy to cover a variety of rule sets. But I would like to see kind of not a more uniform rule set, but I would like to see ones come about that foster more action so that it is more spectator friendly. Because although it's going to be really hard to get jiu-jitsu in front of people that don't train, if you make it exciting enough, there's plenty of other sports that people don't do that they watch. Like look at football, look at, basketball, look at tennis, look at cycling, plenty of sports that people don't participate in, but they're happy to watch. Jiu-jitsu could be that, but we have to have a system and a broadcast that is exciting to watch. And I think we're going there, but I think it's going to take some time before someone comes along and figures out how to make it work.
Yeah, and it's not just necessarily the rules and the action. Like one of the things that makes jiu-jitsu much easier to watch for anybody, especially entry level or just casual sports fans, is having good commentators. Like that makes a huge difference. Because if you got to be pretty elite to watch a match and just know what's going on constantly. like that takes, you could train for 10 years and be a little confused with what's happening on the match. Like having commentators that can call it out, it really helps a ton. And then having podcasts like yours, like that get you excited about the matches, or that will help you break down what actually happened, or the people that are on the mats. That also helps it builds characters in the sport. It builds figures to root for.
Yeah, I think we deal with a lot of bad commentary. We hear it all. We hear great commentators, and we hear a lot of bad commentary. There are more than a few promotions that I will typically mute when watching because the commentary. Sometimes it's just bad commentary. Sometimes it's off-topic commentary, which kind of bugs me for different reasons. Other times it's sort of like they don't take it seriously, and that always bothers me because I just find it disrespectful to the athletes. If you're kind of joking around when you're really supposed to be calling the action, that bothers me as well. But there's a couple guys that do it really, really well, like J-Reg Labudo. Whenever Jay's on the mic, I'm happy to listen to. Josh Palmer, whenever that dude is calling an event, it's awesome to listen to because those guys understand the pacing. They're professional broadcasters, and they understand what it takes to do it right, how to be engaging, how to be informative, how to do predictive commentary. So I think commentary could really come a long way. There's a lot of guys that think that they're hilarious on the mic. And your goal a lot of times in jiu-jitsu commentary is not to be hilarious. Your job is to successfully and kind of explain what's going on into the match, and then tell the viewers what you're watching, and why it's important and where someone's going. And so I hope we get better commentators or more good commentators in the sport in 2019 because I'm tired of listening to stuff on mute.
Yeah. Like, just, you give it a picture. If Maine, passes his knee over Byron's leg and gets to the other side of his leg, he's going to likely pass his guard. Like, and then so suddenly your eyes are drawn to this, and it's something that you were just watching casually. You're watching this little mini fight occur, and it's all hanging on the balance of whether you could, if you're getting your knee passed, where my leg is, or whatever the course may be. Like, it helps a ton to understand it and to make it more entertaining and to appreciate it on a smaller detailed level. It's really hard
to do. There's plenty of guys that are outstanding practitioners that are just not as great commentators. And there's plenty that are great competitors that are great commentators as well. I like hearing, for the most part, high level guys are pretty good commentators and are pretty engaging because they are so up with the current meta that they can sort of just talk about what they're seeing. And they are one or two steps ahead of your average person. And so they can be predictive. Oh, he's probably going to go here with this, or he is looking to pass his knee over, or he's really going to have to cross his hands here for that grip. And then you'll see the competitor cross their hands for the grip. And that commentary is really interesting to me. And then you need a play-by-play guy or a color guy to come in and give flavor to the broadcast and, talk about the score, talk about the time, talk about, maybe if the match gets a little slow, give some background on the grapplers and that sort of thing. And I think that jiu-jitsu broadcasting is really in its infancy. And I hope and I think it will get better as time goes on. But, MMA has been around for a long time. We still hear highlights of terrible MMA commentators that don't understand technical striking or don't understand work on the ground or don't understand cage wrestling. So it happens in all sports, but I'm hoping that jiu-jitsu will establish a more kind of bullpen of professional commentators because commentary is the only thing really you're hearing on a jiu-jitsu broadcast. So it's very, very important.
I mean, one thing that when I watch competitive grappling, and it happens at surprisingly high levels, that I think is a mistake is when the two grapplers, let's just say you and me, go out of bounds, okay? And the ref's like, okay, man, you had mount, bring it back in the middle. And both guys, or sometimes just one guy, will literally crawl back to the middle. And the ref's not making them stay in position. It's like they just drag their tired bodies back to the middle to engage in, me being on a bottom out again. That is such a mentally bad spot to put yourself in as a competitor. I much prefer the guy who, you had me out, I pop up, I jump up, down, and roll my shoulders, and I walk right to the middle of the mat, and I lay down, I'm ready to go. Those are two totally different things. And even on a subconscious level, athletes are picking this up. Oh crap, he's got a lot of energy. I'm not going to be able to hold this guy in mount very long. Or if you see me crawl back to the middle of the mat, it's he's almost done.
It's interesting. I think I'm going to kind of take a sideline here. A lot of competitors don't know the rules for what they're competing on. It happens at surprisingly even at a high level
because there's so many rules. Different rules.
Man, you got a plane flight to wherever you're going to compete. Spend 30 minutes and read through the email that the promoter gave you, or at the rules meeting, ask the rules, understand. Like, who always understands the rules? Keenan and Gordon and Donaher. Those guys understand how to score. Galvao, another guy that always understands, like, okay, this is how we score. This is what we should do from a gamesmanship perspective. This is how we should, we should deal with this situation. I would love to see more competitors understand the rules better and more coaches understand the rules better, because we hear it not hugely frequently, but not infrequently. A coach will be yelling something that's maybe not the best strategy given the rule set, or they don't understand why their competitor doesn't have 2 points. And it's not that they're just trying to get the points called back. It's because they legitimately don't understand. And so, why is there 2 points there? It's like, well, because this promotion has an odd rule for X, Y, or Z, and this is worth 2 points.
Yeah.
And we see it almost every weekend where a coach is arguing with a ref about something, and it's like, well, nope, in that rule set, that's totally what is supposed to happen there. We had a rules meeting, and this is what we talked about. So, I think, and come back to the mat slowly, that doesn't bug me as much, but I wish that promotions would put more emphasis on action, especially on a super fight, that, a guy lazily tying his belt or lazily walking back. I want, like, that kind of changes the pacing of the match as a viewer and isn't great. But again, if a guy's been engaged for 10 minutes of a 15-minute match and he crawls back over, he may be just taking a rest, and that might be just gamesmanship within the match.
Yeah. I don't think of it as taking a rest. I think of it like, just imagine the other competitor. Like, would you rather watch your opponent crawl back to the middle of the mat or get up and walk like they're getting ready to win this match? Like,
I want that dude to use as much energy as possible to get into the center of the mat so I can keep, like, using tons of cardio on him and make him more tired.
But if he's you mentioned with Clay Guida, like, imagine, like, he jumps up and down and is all excited, and then you're like, okay, he's still got plenty of energy. Like, I don't think very many of these guys are going to get themselves tired walking to the middle of the mat. It's just to me, it's a mental lapse they're losing a mental game in this, and they're not making the guy go, oh crap, like, this guy's still got what it takes to be in this fight. I don't know. It's something that I think it's just interesting to watch, and it's always surprising.
Yeah, whenever I'm coaching, I always really instill in the guys that I coach, like, you want to make whatever you're doing kind of scary to the other guy, because especially at the lower levels, you can mentally kick someone off their game really easily. At the higher levels, it's significantly harder to do.
Yeah.
But if you put something on and you make it scary, even though it might not tap someone, you'll kind of slow that person down a little bit. You'll get in their head a little bit. And if you're ready to sort of engage in that kind of fight, it can really put you in a better spot competitively, because you're ready to kind of keep pushing, keep going, because you've trained like that. And I've sort of instilled in you, hey, make this scary, make this kind of a grind, and get ready to, mentally start doing these things. And in these positions that we've trained and drilled, when you're going to have the advantage, really press that into them so that you can throw them off their game. Because especially at the lower levels, you can throw guys off games really easily and disincentivize certain reactions. And so if you're training to do that, I watched the guys that I've coached win kind of just on that alone, where it's like, okay, I know the other guy he's competing against is probably technically better than him by a bit, but my guy is going in really confident in what he knows and going to be ready to be really tough in the bad spots he's going to be in. And he'll wilt the guy throughout the course of a match by just doing those things, and then can beat a technically more skilled grappler kind of on those merits at the lower level.
So looking forward to next year, where do you see any promotions really blossoming, or any people that you have your eye on to do really well that will be a little surprising to the rest of us?
Maybe not even to be surprising. Kind of like we were going to say Dante Leon, and then Leon went out and won Nogi Worlds this year. I was like, okay, well, that's not really a dark horse anymore at that point. Mateus Lutez is probably going to get black belt here really soon. Look for him to do big things. Roberto Jimenez just got black belt this weekend at Nogi Worlds. Look for him to do big things. Pedro Mourinho, again, didn't get black belt, but has the last win over Roberto Jimenez at weight class at Nogi Worlds. He's going to do big things. Who else should you look for? That's a really good question. Like offhand, I can't, like Ty Rotolo, watch the Rotolo brothers.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're going to follow anyone, watch the Rotolo brothers, because those dudes have something different. They always watch out for brother and sister combos in jiu-jitsu. There's something about training with a sibling that seems to make those dudes crazy good. And there's a bunch of different cases of that in jiu-jitsu, but for some reason our sport really lends itself to sibling rivalry. Watch Leon. Keep watching Leon. Keep watching the Rotolos. And I'm trying to look through my athlete list here to figure out who you should just, watch Max Rock Shop as well. He did really well in Shugyo, and yeah, he's a dude to keep an eye out on.
Okay. Just off to the side, totally. Do you think Paul Harris will compete in next year?
He fought Gordon Ryan at World Jiu-Jitsu Festival. I want to say like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Or something like that. I think that match was, I put BJJ Heroes listed by year. Never mind. A couple months ago. Neither would surprise me. I think Polaris has had him on a couple times now. It wouldn't surprise me to see him taking more grappling matches. It also wouldn't surprise me to not see him be active. He's had a couple slower matches, and I think he garners a price tag that, given the kind of matches he's been engaged in recently, would kind of surprise me. To have promoters really chomping at the bit to grab him, especially since he's already had some problems in MMA recently with some knockouts. So his stock, I think, may or may not kind of garner the price that he has.
Yeah.
It could really go with him. It could really go either way. He's a guy I like watching compete when he's on, because he's really exciting. He's an outstanding grappler, but he's been a weird one to watch recently with his performances.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Like it's almost disrespectful to try to actually break somebody's body while they're tapping. Like it's just disrespectful to the sport. And when promotions hire him to compete for them, basically, I think they're selling themselves short as far as like they're cashing in a short-term gain for eyes this time, and in the long run, giving somebody who is a negative on the sport a spotlight. Like, it's frustrating to me when every time I see him on a card, I'm like, man, do we have to do this, guys? Like, is there no other person you could promote or try to get behind or give a payday to than somebody who is literally trying to injure people, like, as goal number one? Like, I'm going to do this until the ref rips me apart.
Yeah,
that's just frustrating.
He's an interesting guy, to say the least. We don't go into a lot of that, honestly, on our show. Too much of the controversial stuff.
Neither do I. Like, I really don't talk about this guy, but it is frustrating.
There's definitely a couple guys like that in jiu-jitsu that are like kind of really frustrating to watch. They're really good grapplers, but they have, I think the best way to put it is issues.
Yeah.
And they, either just have personal issues or issues on the mat or issues off the mat, or they, there's a lot. There's probably 5 guys I can think of offhand that just are always guys that seem to have some sort of issue. And it's frustrating to cover them because when they're on, they're so very good and they're so top level. But when they're just doing weird stuff, it's really hard to root for them in their corner. I'm not going to say any of the guys' names, but it's just, it happens in every sport. But jiu-jitsu, because the talent pool is so much smaller, we're in such a niche sport that a couple of those guys really stand out.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, it just sucks, because I wish everyone in the sport would be as cool as 99% of the people that I run into doing the sport. I mean, I've dropped into gyms all across the country, and I've interviewed a bunch of different guys that are professionals and coaches, and pretty much everyone I've interacted with, has been outstandingly friendly and a great part of the community. It's just a couple guys that just aren't kind of wired the same way, and it just kind of sucks.
Yeah. Well, remember how we were talking about how most people who watch jiu-jitsu do jiu-jitsu versus MMA. And like in MMA, when the guy's laying there unconscious and the guy hits him one other time or two, Like that's like, okay, that's not cool. That's frustrating. But when you watch a submission and the guy is tapping frantically and the guy continues to put pressure and continues to get more rotation on whatever, the shoulder lock or whatever, like it's so like disgusting. It's like I can imagine doing this and then I cannot imagine like doing that at all. Like, I'll roll to basically anybody, but that person who's like ignoring your tap and just like going, it's like, it's what it is the promotion. Here's what I feel. I can't read their minds, but they're willing to try to get a highlight that's so interesting because of its destructive nature that they're wanting like 1 million hits on some little clip or whatever. However many is a lot of hits, I don't know. But
on the other side of that, I think. Oh, sorry, continue your point.
They're just wanting something exciting like that to happen versus actually grow the sport with the people who are doing it. And have something here for years. I think people who are willing to get that short-term gain are really just short-sighted and aren't planning on being here in 10 years. And
there's a lot of guys like that. I mean, I've definitely personally dealt with promoters that are just, man, I would much rather not deal with this promoter in the future. And some of them we don't. But there's plenty of promoters I think that are really out there to do a good job. Yeah. And there's a guy that may or may not have some problems, but they're a top-level guy. And including them in your event is, somewhat important because that guy's not always that guy during the events. Like certain times, problem guys are super respectful and winning and losing. But sometimes you get the day where they're just off and they do weird stuff. And so it's, I'm all about second chances, but there's certain guys that always make me nervous whenever we cover them or whenever we're like leading into a preview where it's like, okay, which version of the guy are you going to get? Are you going to get the guy that's super cool and respectful, like the guys that I've talked to at events? Or are you going to get that weird performance from the guy where they're going to freak out or they're going to do something weird or say something odd or, crank a sub when there's an obvious tap. So it's, I don't know. It's definitely, I put a little bit of it on the promoter. Yeah. But it's also, what version of that guy are you getting to show up? Like it's an adult. You're dealing with an adult that has done some stuff that, is pretty frowned upon in the community, but they've also competed and they've been totally fine. And so I think, I'm not a promoter. And so I can't really make that justification. I'm not putting my money behind these professional events and I'm not paying these guys out. But I definitely understand your perspective and see it. It's just, it's something that because I'm not engaged in it from the promotional side, I haven't given a ton of thought to, would this guy be on my event? And there's certain guys that I'll be like, yep, definitely would not invite that guy. But there's other guys where you kind of have a question where it's like, well, would you give that guy the opportunity to go compete in your event if he was interested because he's a top level guy and maybe that, he's a nice guy? You just don't know. Yeah. And from their perspective, a lot of promoters are one bad show away from being done. Oh yeah, there's not a lot of money in jiu-jitsu. I mean, I've talked to plenty of promoters that are underwater on shows and, put out this, need to have this many ticket sales and they need, the venue did this extra thing and they need to have this last minute person come in for their streaming or it's a tough business because you're marketing to a really small audience. You're marketing to practitioners that are interested in the pro scene that are going to tune in for the pro scene. And like, that's a tough market to break into. And we're seeing a lot of the promotions that are the first over the hill there and not everyone's going to make it. So if you can put an extra, 400 eyes or 1,000 eyes in your event, that may be the difference between you running another show or not running another show. And so it's, when I don't have to make that decision with our show every week. I just host the show and we run it. And next week I'm going to do another show and I'm going to do another show. I'm not having to balance the budget and balance the books. Like, okay, well, if we don't get X amount of listens or downloads this week, then we're not going to there's no show next week. And that's a tough, these 4 guys or 10 guys are out of a job or, I can't pay my athletes now because the show didn't make enough money and I contracted. And it's a rock and a hard place. We are in a really, really tough sport to make money and to be able to put on pro events is a level of headache, which is why I don't put on pro events, which is a level of headache that, having talked to those promoters, man, those dudes, the ones that are doing it right, those dudes work so hard because they love the sport. You wouldn't, if you didn't love the sport, you would do something other than put on jiu-jitsu events. you would make your money in an easier way. No one, or not anyone that I know of, is putting on jiu-jitsu events that's not super into jiu-jitsu, or because there's not enough money in it unless you love it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It's, again, like we both do, jiu-jitsu podcasts. We're in a really niche market, and there's a lot of practitioners that tune in and really love what we do. But if I wanted to make, a giant podcast, I would most likely focus on a topic that was a little more broad, or a little more general than the niche that I love.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And so if somebody wants to keep up with you, or what's the best place to go to find the podcast?
So the best place to go to find the podcast is any podcast service you have. We are pretty much listed on every sort of podcast platform. We are on iTunes, we're on Spotify, we're on TuneIn, we're on Stitcher, we're on Podbean. We are pretty much everywhere. If there's a podcast app that you have, you can find us at Grappling Rewind. We also have a website, grapplingrewind.com. There you can actually find our events list. So the actual list of all the pro events that are coming up and some of the ones that have passed. We're actually in the process of redoing our website to make that a lot more user-friendly and more easily accessible. You can email us. You can find us on Instagram at Grappling Rewind, on Twitter at Grappling Rewind. We are on Facebook at Grappling Rewind. And if you ever want to talk to us on stuff like Reddit, we're there as well. So really, we try to kind of blanket the social media. We try to be everywhere. I really want to be engaged in the community as part of the show that we do, because a lot of great feedback we get is from various platforms. And guys, hey, are you aware of this event coming up, or do you see this finish, or do you see this highlight? And so the community has just been absolutely great. So you can find us pretty much anywhere on those platforms. Our video show also comes out on YouTube every Wednesday, and we're kind of in the process of trying to grow that side of our platform. So subscriptions on there really help. And then, as always, just telling your friends about our show if you like our show is really the biggest way that we grow our show.
Cool. And YouTube, that's, you guys do basically a video podcast. YouTube keeps telling me I'm not good looking enough to be a video show, so audio only for this guy.
Dude, I got a face for radio. It's great.
We're jiu-jitsu guys, man.
Yeah, man.
But it's been a blast having you on here. Urge everybody to go check out Grappling Rewind and find it, whatever app you're listening to this on. You hit that little magnifying glass button and type it in, and you'll be able to find him. Weekly show covering all the latest things that's happening in the sport. So thank you so much, Maine, for hopping on here with me.
Yeah, it was outstanding. I really appreciate having the conversation, and look forward to talking in the future.
Man, it was great to have Maine on the show this week, and I met him at ADCC, and we really struck it off and started talking and having a good time as far as kind of making a little bit of a connection there, and as two fellow podcasters in the jiu-jitsu community, and it was fun to get to meet him in such a interesting place, and we both kind of doing our thing behind the scenes if we the best we could, and watching and trying to enjoy the event at the same time. Wow, that's just one of the many things that I really got from going to ADCC was meeting Maine and a few other people as well. But it's tremendous, and now it finally brought this to the point where he's on the show as a guest, so that's kind of fun. And Maine, anytime you want something from us, let us know, and we'll absolutely be happy to help you guys out with anything you have going on. So thank you for the recap of the year. It's something that I think has a lot of value and a lot of replay ability. Go back and either look on YouTube for the people he's talking about, or if you're a member of Flow Grappling, you can go there and watch some of these videos he's talking about and kind of get that visual aspect of what he's discussing in the podcast this week. So thank you so much, Maine. If this episode is something that you think a friend would like, please share that with them. It's really helped us out in our growth. We don't do a big marketing campaign. We're not doing anything crazy as far as that goes. We're word of mouth largely, and some people find this kind of randomly. But if your friends would enjoy the show, please share that and help us out. And hopefully, if all goes well, it also helps your friend out. Like they'll either enjoy it or maybe get something from this. So that's always helpful, and we're always honored when somebody tells us they were just recommended by a friend. Like, man, that friend is all right. Guys, we have an article this week, and you know what? Why not keep this artistic thing rolling here And how about 13 acrylic painting techniques all beginners should try? Now, let's not run down the entire list of 13 because I don't think any of us are really much for being a painter, but it's fun. And we've done this lately. We used to always have jiu-jitsu articles, and then we would occasionally have just a general sports article, about weightlifting or stretching or something like that. But here, any skill that you're wanting to develop, whether it be painting or, Gary's ballet class or, jiu-jitsu, we all have similar methods of learning, and we can learn things from other areas. So that's kind of the goal here. Guys, what do you think here about this painting article? And it can be found on myblueprint.com. And I'll put a link in the show notes if you are that artist.
But before we get to the article, I want to talk about Bob Ross again.
I know you do, Gary.
He was a longtime animal lover. And, there's a story that said as a boy, he grew up in Florida. He was such an animal lover that he once nursed an alligator back to health in his family's tub. What an incredible person.
The Bob Ross fan club. Gary's not only a member, he's also the president.
That's his goal anyway.
No, I like the article. I know, I guess, just enough about painting to recognize that a lot of these painting techniques that are suggested are sort of niche painting techniques. They're not going to be for everybody. They're not going to fit in everybody's
tool bag. Yeah,
they're not going to be in everybody's tool bags. It's not going to fit everybody's painting style. And so, to relate it to jiu-jitsu, I think this is sort of like. I don't think you have to get really good at wrist locks to say that you're good at jiu-jitsu. You certainly don't have to get really good at like the worm guard or berimbolo. There's a lot of these techniques that I think are sort of optional, but everybody should try them because you never know what you'll learn in the process of trying them, and you never know when you'll stumble across something that actually does fit into your game. So I like this idea of looking at all of the possibilities out there, and even though some of them might not work for you in the end, try them all.
Yeah, I like that. You can look at all those different techniques or all those different styles as a different technique. Try them all, see what works for you. And there's different ways to learn from them too. We can go back to these techniques, and I've been talking about Bob Ross, but one of his favorite techniques was the wet on wet technique, and basically he perfected a way to paint over the top of wet oil paint instead of waiting for it to dry. And what this allowed beginners to do was learn quickly. As a method where you could learn quickly with a minimum of tools. You don't have to go out and buy 15 gis and stuff like that, and you could complete the pictures quickly, which you don't have to have a 6 or 7 hour class. So, you can use the wet on wet technique, and bring it back on the mat there also.
Man, Gary's going deep into the Bob Ross painting world. One of the techniques I was reading about here, and I think I understand the idea of it, is layering. And so you start, if you could think of Bob Ross, man, I don't know where else to go. He'd start with like the background, like a sky, and then he would layer on some clouds, and then he would alter those clouds a little bit, and he's building up on this thing. And a lot of times, what's painted in the very background, the blue sky, is just a small portion of what's left. But he painted the entire sky blue, and then he's added clouds, and then he's covered some of the clouds with mountains, and then he's, it just, the layers of it. And I don't know how right on this is with jiu-jitsu, but I often think this is very similar. When sometimes I'll teach somebody like a standing pass, and they literally stand up, and then they get swept. It's like, okay, like you're not ready to do the standing pass yet. We need to work on how to not get swept immediately once you stand up, because they're used to passing maybe on their knees, or they just have a hard time keeping their balance or their base. And so that layer hasn't been put down yet as far as what they should be doing. If you can't stand up in the guard without getting swept pretty quickly by somebody of similar skill, you're not ready to learn a standing pass. You're ready to learn maybe just how to control somebody a little bit better while you're standing. Maybe you need to learn the principles of what they're trying to do as they set up their sweeps. You need to build those layers first. You can't just jump right in. Not that standing passes are some crazy hard thing, but if you don't have that base layer, that blue sky up there, you shouldn't be painting the mountain already, because by the time you try to put that blue in there and the mountain's already up there, it's going to mess up the whole thing. So kind of some things are better learned in order.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a great reinforcement of the idea that you got to get the basics down first. Submissions from side control. If you can't hold side control, if you can't transition between, the basic types of side control, you're putting the cart before the horse if you're trying to learn all the submissions first. That was great, Byron.
I like it. They talk about glazing, as a technique. And, we all want our paintings to shine. Just like we want our jiu-jitsu to shine. And, when I see glazing, the first thing I think of is, man, we're going to patch our gi up. We're going to make our gi shine. We're going to put a nice BjjBrick patch on that. If you are a Patreon supporter, you get that. Maybe even get the old throwback patch. But, when we go out there on the mat, we're going to be glazed. We're going to have our gi shining and make us look special.
Just like Bob Ross.
Definitely just like Bob Ross.
Guys, I want to mention the color mixing techniques, and it talks about there's separate ways to mix the color, but in reality, in jiu-jitsu, we're eventually going to be blending our techniques together. So you're going to combine your triangle and your arm bar together and kind of blend them, and that really is where jiu-jitsu becomes more of an art form, where everybody has certain techniques that they're good at, and then you'll get other techniques that you're also good at, and you'll find ways to blend these together that really are like colors on a palette. The amount of colors you can make are limitless. It's just add a little bit more blue to this, or add a little bit more yellow, and the colors change, and there's so many different things. The way you're holding someone's elbow, or the reason why you hold it that way is because during your Kimura you set it up doing this, but now you could hold it the same way, and it's really a good way to set up that omoplata or whatever. I'm just making stuff up here, but as you develop your favorite techniques, those will eventually combine with each other to make that really nice mauve color that you really like. So,
what color is mauve?
I have no idea. I'm colorblind, Gary.
Well, I'm not sure, but for some people, it would be a part of their family of colors, which I think is this guy's last point. Create a family of colors. I guess if you're an artist, and you pick 2 or 3 shades, 2 or 3 colors that work well with you like working with, maybe that just makes it easier from painting to painting. I'm always a big proponent of grouping your techniques together in a smart way. I've got a friend that's just kind of getting good at a hip bump sweep, and I asked him, if he's playing with the Kimura or the guillotine. He's like, no, haven't really thought about it. And I'm like, man, once you get that arm isolated, if they defend the sweep, then you've got other options there, and I'm a big fan of that. So, create a family of colors, create a family of techniques.
I like it, Joe. I like the one, get creative. And I know Joe and Byron a minute ago, you guys were talking about the basics are so important. But, when you're painting and when you're doing jiu-jitsu, get creative. Sometimes just have some fun. Get away from the basics. Try a flying triangle. Try a, flying armbar. Have some fun. Get creative. Do some crazy stuff. I find myself sometimes getting in a rut, and you guys know I'm just a really big proponent on basics. And, Byron and I, we laugh that we don't even do De La Hiva. We're more just total basic guys. But, man, sometimes it's just fun just to try something that I normally wouldn't do. A scissor takedown, an Inamari roll, which, I really like trying to do. Just something fun and get creative. It's going to teach your body how to move. You're going to learn some new techniques. You're going to have fun doing it. And who knows, it may become one of your main things in your tool bag.
Yeah, if any of my training partners are listening, I want you to try a flying arm bar now and then too, but not when you're rolling with me.
I like the examples Gary gives. Just try something, flight arm bar. Like, that never ends in a bad way. That never has you land on your head and neck.
Try it with extra mat. But, okay, so let's get rid of that and let's talk about the Inamari roll. Let's talk something that way. Yeah. So there we go.
No, it's all valid, Gary.
Yeah.
Try something different.
Yeah, I mean, just do stuff you don't normally do. If you don't do omoplatas, try some omoplatas. If you don't do De La Hiva guard, try that. If you don't do Barambolas, try that. Just add a little bit of change to your game and have fun.
Yeah, just set some small goals. Like every class, I'm going to invert at least one time.
Well, the good thing, though, make sure you have a good chiropractor.
Yeah, if you're playing that inverted game, for sure.
Yeah, so that wraps up our painting article with the chiropractor. I'll put a link in the show notes to the article.
Yeah, I want to go back real quick. We're talking about painting, but, another thing I think we could take from Bob Ross that we could put in jiu-jitsu, like his biggest catchphrase. I know we just used a quote by him, but his biggest catchphrase was, "We don't make mistakes, just happy accidents." And, I think that's great for the mat. I go to pass, but I let you get the underhook and you take my back and choke me out. Let's learn from it. Let's just call it a happy accident.
Yeah, I happy accidented myself right into a triangle the other day.
The other day,
Actually, I do that pretty much every class. So
yeah, those happy accidents. Like I know Byron and I the other day, we went out to lunch and we went to a great Mexican restaurant, and he had a happy accident before he could get to the bathroom.
Definition of happy is a bit strange, but I happily got to get new pants, right, Kerry?
Yeah. Well, the great thing was, Byron said it was a happy accident. And he actually was so happy about it. He used the wet on wet method. And he wanted to show me his glazed art.
Wow. That's a bit graphic.
Wow.
I'm just glad you drove, Kerry.
There was a little bit of shine to it.
You drove us to that place and had to drive me back.
I made you walk back.
Oh, man. Some people that wouldn't leave us hanging or make us walk back would be our Patreon supporters.
Ooh.
Gary, tell us a little bit about Patreon and how it works.
Patreon, first of all, we do have a link to it in the show notes, but this show would be hard to run each and every week without our Patreon supporters. Basically, it's a website for content producers like ourselves, where you can go on and pledge, $1 per show or whatever you'd like to pledge. And, it comes out every week there. But, you guys have really helped us out a lot. This is a free show, and we don't make Byron makes a lot of money. Joe and I don't. So it just helps us keep the show going. And you get some special privileges for being a Patreon supporter. We do have is it 5-inch, Byron?
Yes. Measure it and brag about it, Gary.
Yeah, our 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch. We kind of talked about adding some glitter already. You can put that on your gi. We do have a special private Facebook group. And, the cool thing about the Facebook group is sometimes Byron may have an interview lined up and, with so-and-so, and he'll ask, hey, does anybody have any questions that we could ask them? And, once a month we do a content episode. And a lot of times, too, Byron will ask our listeners, hey, what's a good content episode? Or he may have a vote if we have a couple different ones out there. So it's a way for you to get involved in the show, too. But we really, really are appreciative of our Patreon supporters. Hey, real quick, too, we talked about how our listeners could add to the show. Last week, Joe Marquez sent us a article. So if you have an article or a blog or anything jiu-jitsu related, send us an email, bjjbrick@gmail.com, if you would like to get your article on the show. We'd rather use an article from one of our listeners than trying to find one. We're actually a little bit lazy, especially myself, and so I'd rather have somebody who listens to our show, and maybe we could help you out there too, have people come to your website or your blog.
Yeah. And we do have 2 new members of Patreon, Gary.
Yes.
And that's Vincent and Keeley. And you guys, do join our private Facebook group. They and maybe they've joined it already since we've recorded this. But send me a message at bjjbrick@gmail.com with a link to your Facebook page, or just send me a Facebook friend request. Byron Jabara, Jabara. I'll pop right up. Byron is my first name, and you could add me. There's only one on Facebook that I know of, and we'll get you added to the private group if you are a Patreon supporter. So we have our regular page. We're all there, and that's fun, and we post a lot there. But to join the private group, we want you to. That's for the. I want to give a little something extra to the Patreon supporters. So that's where you'll find extra trash talking.
You know, Byron, my mind doesn't always work right. And, you know, I'm always trying to play jokes on you, and you're always trying to play jokes on me. And the first thing I thought of just now when you said, I'm the only Byron Jabara that pops up, there's not any others. And the first thing I was thinking of, I'm going to make a fake Byron Jabara Facebook profile.
That's too much, Gary. I almost messaged you that idea.
Oh, seriously?
Seriously, I was just thinking I'm going to message Gary and he should do that.
Joe and I, man, we think alike. That's why I like Joe so much.
Oh, man.
But yeah, I was just thinking, you know, then I could make Byron really weird and really even uglier than he is. And I
was going to say, make Byron look really weird. That wouldn't take much work.
No,
yeah,
but I could
just
make
grab one of the pictures I have in my original profile, Gary.
We could just put a little bit of glitter on it.
I'm looking forward to this, Gary. I know you work hard on some odd projects like that, and man, it's going to be happening. It'll be nice.
Byron, I can't get him to write an article for the website, but I can get him to make fake profiles.
What martial arts should I do? Maybe I'm a painter.
Not a chance.
Oh, bro.
Yeah. I mean, you can't. You've got all your fingers, and you don't have any hair.
Maybe the alter ego does not.
Yeah.
We'll see where Gary goes with this.
The one thing about this article I can really tell you, though, or this episode, is I've learned a lot about Bob Ross. And I really didn't know a lot about him before, but I really like Bob Ross now.
There's a lot of his painting episodes on YouTube. I don't know if they're all on there or not, but
crazy. But by estimates, they say he's done over 30,000 oil paintings over the course of his life. And, you know, that equals 576 portraits of happy trees each year. And remember, I told you trees were 91%. So kind of crazy.
Wow, that is a little on the crazy side. But
yeah. You know, he works so fast. The guy actually published 20 books and over 100 videos.
He's got us beat, guys.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, man, Gary, he's just wanting to read out facts. But,
yes,
Gary,
we all have mentors. You know, one of my mentors is Byron. And, you know, Bob Ross was always quick to praise his mentor, Bill Alexander. You know, I don't really praise you as much, Byron, but maybe I'll start doing it.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe on me with a fake page.
Maybe I'll praise the fake Byron Jabara.
This is going to be good. Maybe yeah.
So, hey, if anybody here within the next couple of weeks gets a request from Byron Jabara, please accept it. And the reason I say that, I mean, I've created many fake profiles before. I need as many friends as possible off the bat to get more people to accept it. The more friends I have, you know, the better chance I get people to accept it. And that's the one thing you run into when you do make fake profiles, is to get people to accept you, so then you can get more people to accept you, so you get a little bit of legitimacy to it.
Yeah.
So let me get this straight. We're pulling a practical joke on Byron, and we're telling him about it.
Yeah, his technique is a little bit lacking.
We say this No, it's not at all. Joe, we talk about this all the time. Byron is not very intelligent. So he still won't figure it out.
Gary, I'm gonna get a hold of MySpace and tell them to shut this thing down.
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't lead Byron anywhere. That should be our quote for next week.
We'll just have this episode trail off into the abyss. Don't forget, you know, they led me to water. I'm quite thirsty, but I'm also quite sweaty.
And don't forget to shower.
Yeah, go train, guys. Do it smart, and you'll get better. We'll see you on the mats.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.